preparations. A grand battleship had been set aside as the Empress flagship, at her request, much to the surprise of the assembled Space Marine chapters. It was well over 4 times the size of the Sanguinium Martyrs, and from what the captain and others had boasted, it carried enough firepower to obliterate a planet, as well as the fleet that would be guarding it. Using planetary destruction as a unit of measurement had killed a bit of Twilight's enthusiasm, but she made no objection as of yet. As Celestia and the others prepared for their departure, Twilight had turned to research. From what the war meeting had told her, they would be heading south towards the planet of Deliverance, and from there onto an Orc empire that had started to expand towards some important hive worlds. Traveling there would take several months, after which they would spend as much time as it took dealing with the Orcs. It would be almost 2 years since Twilight had left Equestria. Thoughts of her home and her friends lingered from time to time, but never as long as she would have liked. They were not fading, just drowned out by all that was going on around her. She had made a note to ask Princess Celestia about that once she had time. For now, she had studying to do. The first order of business was to find out what they would be dealing with, so she made herself comfortable in one of the libraries Mashes had shown her and started studying, especially after he provided some reports from his previous encounters. Mash's notes had quite a lot to say about Orcs, and none of it seemed very pleasant. A warlike race that only ever seemed interested in killing things, Orcs resembled diamond dogs in a way, with hunched postures and overly long arms, and most of their weapons and armor were cobbled together from garbage and spare parts. Every one of them had varying shades of green skin, red eyes, and mouths filled with tusk-like teeth. They seemed to get bigger and stronger with age, with some notable ones being as big as a small vehicle. Perhaps most troubling of all, there was no such thing as one Orc. The stories and reports always spoke of hordes of them, with the smaller ones numbering in hundreds, rushing forth without fear or care for death. She saw tales of planets savaged by Orcs, entire armies wiped out for nothing more than a few more days slowing the hordes, and many a mighty hero dying valiantly battling against the green tide. But now humanity had its greatest hero again. Surely Celestia could help them against something like the Orcs. Twilight was shaken from her thoughts by a knock on the door. "Is someone there?" There was a pause before Sister Rebecca stepped in, a small tray held in her hands. "Pardon for the intrusion, Lady Tara," she said. "But my sister and I felt that you might need some food and tea." Twilight turned her attention to the tray. Though the food had probably been reprocessed several times, Sister Rebecca was skilled enough to make it look appetizing, and the tea would always be welcome. When a small growl rose from Twilight's stomach, her mind was quick to put studying aside for a few moments. "Thanks," Twilight said. "I could use some food right now." Rebecca nodded, crossing the room to set the tray down at Twilight's side. "You can join me if you'd like." Rebecca chewed her lip for a moment before giving a small smile. "Thank you, Lady Tara." Rebecca found a chair and sat down next to Twilight, the chair creaking slightly from the weight of the sister's armor. "What is it that you're researching?" "I wanted to know more about where we were going, and what we would find once we got there," Twilight said, taking the tea and giving it a sip. It was a bit stronger than she usually liked, but it would suffice. "What do you know about Orcs?" "They're rather hard to kill if you are not well prepared." Rebecca leaned her head back slightly as she continued. "I remember one of our earlier missions was intercepted by a band of their pirates. I broke my combat knife and dented my bolter trying to kill one that got too close, and it would have killed me had Sister Naomi not taken its arm off with her chainsword." "That's not exactly what I was looking for," Twilight said quickly, her face growing a bit pale. "I'm sorry, Lady Tara, we have not fought many Xenos during our time under Naomi's guidance," Rebecca said. "If it is knowledge of them, I would say that the Lord Inquisitor would be one to speak to. Mashes sent me here first. Other than that, I haven't seen him around all that much." "Oh," Rebecca looked away for a moment. "I wish I could have been of more help to you in that regard." "That's okay," Twilight took a sip from her tea. "I just wanted to be ready, that's all. I've always found that turning towards the Empress in worship is a perfect way for one to prepare for what they may face," Rebecca said, smiling. "She is the light of the galaxy, after all, we would be fools to hide from it. Twilight regarded Rebecca for a moment, the sister giving her a confused look. Is something the matter? No, nothing's wrong. Twilight started, stopping only when Rebecca gave a short nod. I keep forgetting, you're still getting used to this, she said. I promise you, we will educate you as best we can. I'm sure you will, and I'm thankful for that. Twilight started. There are times, though, that I wish that the Empress was just present a little more for these sorts of things. She is always present in some form or another, though, Rebecca pointed out. Though I suppose you mean physical presence. Twilight gave a nod, taking another sip from her tea. This is pretty good, she said. Where did you get this blend? Oh, that. Rebecca asked, blushing slightly. It's a bit of vanity, really. Sister Naomi allows me and my sister to care for some tea plants from our home world. I think it's much better than that Tana tea the Inquisitor's henchmen offered us. I doubt that they would be very appreciative of that, Twilight started. Though, their tea is really bitter, it's like drinking a bowl of vinegar. There was a pause before the two women giggled. I cannot believe I have ever heard anyone describe Tana tea like that, Rebecca said as she tried to compose herself. Oh my, look at me. I don't remember the last time I have spoken to anyone like this, let alone laughed over tea. I'm sure you have some time with your sisters, right? Well, Rebecca's face grew a bit more serious. Only really with Veronica. Sister Naomi is rather stern in regards to matters of the squad. Ruth does not exactly have knowledge beyond such matters as fighting for the Empress, and Judith, the sister shook her head. I love my sisters dearly, but they are not always the best for conversations. Maybe you just need to engage them a little more. Twilight offered. I know I've had my problems with opening up to people in the past, but talking to them can go a long way. I'm sure, Rebecca nodded. I have always been open to my sisters. Veronica and I were always taught that that was the polite thing to do when around those whom you trusted. But I suppose it can be a bit frustrating when you open yourself up to others and they are unwilling to be open in return. I guess it can. Twilight finished her tea and set it aside. You can always come talk to me if you want. Helping people with problems like this is, kind of a thing I've gotten good at. Oh? The Empress has had you act as a counselor. Kind of. Twilight gave a sheepish grin. She felt it would be helpful if I got out a bit and gained a good understanding of how people are supposed to work together. A gross oversimplification of her friendship reports, but divulging everything would take far too long and might not go over well, even with the sisters. That is a wonderful task. Rebecca nodded. I know my sister would love to learn from you. Veronica has always had a passion for helping others, even if she does not get much of a chance to show that in ways other than fighting the enemies of mankind. Well, perhaps once this business with the orcs blows over, then we can have a nice talk about it. Twilight's smile faltered when she saw Rebecca grow stern. Though we may not always fight against the alien, it is a threat that does not always blow over. She said before her smile returned. But I am sure that my sisters would love a chance to talk to you in a more informal setting. Oh, there was a pause before Twilight spoke again. I should probably keep studying. Do you think you can help me? I would be honored to, Lady Tara. It was back to combat drills for Mashes and his entourage. As dumb as the greenskins could be, taking them for granted had gotten many a soldier he had encountered during his career killed. With the Empress having no pending missions for him, he and the Valhallans practically lived in the training halls, practicing every combat maneuver and training regimen they could think of short of challenging one of the Astaroths accompanying them on the journey. As he watched Nikolai and Alexis sparring, Mashes caught sight of Sister Naomi and two of her squadron enter the training room. Surprisingly, the Sister Superior had removed her helmet, revealing the brand of the Blade Lotus on her cheek. It is not only Angelique that has benefited from Tara's influence, I see, he thought, not moving as the sisters approached him. Lord Mashes, Sister Naomi began. I spoke with the sister under your command, and she told me I could find you here. I had hoped that my sisters might have some time to train with you and your men. They are always welcome, Mashes replied. Though I am not certain that the sparring methods of the Valhallans would be adequate for your sisters. Any form of training is valuable if a soldier is to survive on the battlefield, Naomi countered. And as Lady Tara and the Empress are currently occupied, there is no better way to keep my fellow sisters occupied. Fair point. Mashes turned to the Valhallans. Alexis, Nikolai. The sisters will be training alongside us, pair up and continue the drills from before. The two Valhallans nodded, breaking away from one another while sisters Ruth and Judith approached. Your troopers will be up to the task of sparring with my girls, no? Naomi asked. As you said, any form of training is valuable if a soldier is to survive on the battlefield. Mashes replied, watching as Sister Judith picked up Alexis and tossed him to the floor like a sandbag. And as for training, I am surprised that not all of your sisters have joined us today. Veronica and Rebecca felt it best to tend to Lady Tara as she continued her studies. Naomi shook her head. I care for the girl deeply, but she must understand that she cannot hope to save the Imperium solely through reading. I will admit, that is one of my fears as well. Mashes looked back towards Naomi. Tara has had little real-world experience in defending the Imperium, even with the Empress tutelage to fall back on. I can only imagine what will happen when she is placed in her first combat situation. Had she more zeal about her, perhaps she would hold, but she is still quite apt for questioning different aspects of our faith. Naomi sighed. I do not wish to rush her in this matter. She is the Empress student, taking care around her is more than just trying to teach a normal student. I know, which is why I have decided to take matters into my own hands at this. Naomi raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I have spoken with the Empress and asked that Tara be assigned to one of the rearguard regiments in the upcoming battle. I figured that with her head for knowledge, she would be perfect for coordinating supplies, vehicles, and men for the Empress offensive. Once we have our victory, we can move forward for some easy mopping up actions and ensure that Tara is not harmed or swamped by conflict. I can see logic in that. Naomi looked away from Mashes for a moment. With such experiences, she would be more ready to take on heavier loads in the future. That was my intention. Mashes turned back to the others. The Valhallans were holding their own, but could only do so much against the unrelenting push of the sisters. Sister Naomi, I would like to apologize. For what? For my actions during our hunt for Primarch Korux. Mashes turned back towards Naomi. I understand that it was a sensitive topic for you to discuss, and perhaps I was a little too forward in pushing you to admit to what had happened. Lord Mashes, Naomi started. I understand what you are trying to say, but I realize that I had been acting foolish myself. Lady Tara spoke to me on the matter, and she made me realize, perhaps I had been relying too much on my own fear to operate to my fullest capacity. I may not fully accept what happened to me in my childhood, but then, I am still working towards making my peace with it. Mashes remained silent, watching the sister intently for several moments. Sensing that Naomi had nothing further to say, he turned back just in time to see Ruth pin Nikolai with a swift strike. I wish you the best of luck in that regard, he said. I understand that you do not think highly of inquisitors, but I am more than willing to offer my help in any way possible. I will keep that in mind, Lord Mashes. Naomi replied. For now, I would like to focus on preparations for our battle against the Greenskins. Of course there was a pause before Mashes spoke again. You know, Sister Naomi, that there can only be so much preparation from merely watching others train. The sister looked to Mashes, one eyebrow raised. Is that a challenge, Lord Mashes? She asked with a slight chuckle. If you see it as such. Mashes replied. Let the others train for a little longer, and then we will have our opportunity. With grand strategy settled on, now was the time to speak of smaller-scale operations. Celestia had foregone her armor for the day, choosing a white and gold uniform her custodes had procured for her. Before her was a map of the target system, a larger world named Caesarea 4, sections controlled by invading orcs highlighted in a garish green. Those sections controlled by the Imperium, highlighted in red, had shrank down to control of only a few of the larger hive cities backed against the strip mines that fueled the planet's economy. Even with the forces she had brought to bear, it would take some time to fully cleanse the planet of the aliens. Still planning. Celestia did not look up as Corax stepped into the room. As always, she said. You know as well as I do that one cannot be too careful when preparing a military campaign, especially against an enemy as unpredictable as the Greenskins. Indeed. Corax nodded. Though I believe my original suggestion of assassinating the ruling warlord and letting the aliens fight among themselves should not be dismissed outright. I never said I was dismissing it, Corax. Celestia looked up from the map at the Prim Arch. Merely that it needed some work to better fit the strategy one have prepared. She looked back to the map, her chin resting on her folded hands as she thought. From what we have been able to discern from earlier probes, she said. The guard divisions deployed to Caesarea 4 have managed to stop the orcs from advancing any further. I have no doubt that they will be able to hold the aliens there until we can arrive and organize our counterstrike. Your task in this will be to link up with the elements of the Raven Guard positioned on the planet, start taking apart the orcs' supply lines and keep their focus off the cities until we are ready to launch the attack. Easy enough. Corax leaned over the map. I will need air support if this disruption plan is to be effective. The Imperial Navy and the Minotaurs will be at your disposal. Are you sure? Celestia raised an eyebrow at this as Corax continued. The Minotaurs have seemed somewhat resentful of the position you have placed them in, at least from my own observations. I have seen no real resentment other than Moloch's hesitance to accept me as his Empress. Celestia turned back to the map. Perhaps it is that the Minotaurs still hold lingering loyalties to the High Lords, but this will be a test to see how well they can operate under my command. Should they fail to heed your commands, they shall answer to me. If you feel that is best, Corax said. And what of your student, Terra? She will be under the watch of Inquisitor Mashes for the initial stages of the campaign. Some work coordinating the divisions needed for our attack will be well within her skills. There was silence for a moment as Celestia looked to Corax. You do not approve. Only in the extent that you appear to be shielding her from the truth of the galaxy. Corax replied. I respect you greatly, but there are times when you seem all too eager to push others away when they could be of great help to you. This is nothing like the heresy, Corax, Celestia said. You know as well as I do that she is not ready to be placed into a combat situation. Were I to throw caution to the wind, she could panic or worse die before I could do anything to help her. Terra's role in the crusade is far too great to risk right now. And when will you find a suitable time? Corax moved closer to Celestia. While I do doubt the girl's martial capabilities, I saw within her an earnestness and willingness to help that I have not seen since Sanguinius. That is something that cannot be so easily stifled, and she will find ways to stretch your watch until she breaks free completely. And if she is not bloodied by then, she will die, and unfortunately then her blood would fall upon your hands. Celestia's breath caught for a moment, her hands tightening. I did not expect a lecture from you, Corax, she said. As one who is no stranger to having blood on their hands, I believe I am the only one qualified to speak to you in such a manner. There was a lengthy pause before Celestia sighed and lowered her head. I have made mistakes, probably more mistakes than any mortal in this realm, she said. Not a day goes by when I am not reminded of the wrong I have done, and even my attempts to do good only leave shattered lives behind. There was a pause before she looked up to Corax. For once in my life, I want to know that I preserved some small sliver of innocence. For the sake of Terra, and for you, I hope that you are right. Corax turned to leave before hesitating. I suppose I should prepare to face my sons once more. I hope that I can still face them as I did before. You will, Corax. Celestia turned back to the map. I may not hold faith in many things, but I have come to see that reconciliation is still strong in the universe.